Kim Jong-Seok was just 29. In a world that demands so much from young dreams, his light flickered out on June 4, 2025. No one expected it. Nothing about his sudden passing seemed fair. For family, friends, colleagues, and fans, it felt like someone had ripped out part of the sky. He woke that day as he had many days before, with hopes, with plans, with someone waiting to see him smile. His life, visible in glossy magazine spreads, Instagram posts, YouTube shorts, and moments of brightness under lights and cameras, also held shadows none of us fully knew. What we know now is that the family confirmed his death on June 4, and on June 6 they laid him to rest, but in between those dates so many questions arose, so many rumors spread, and so many hearts were forced to watch amid confusion. When the world heard the news, grief came quickly. Friends posted tributes. "I still can't believe I'll never be able to see your smiling face again." Photos of funeral wreaths, soft lighting, mourning clothes. The same kind of mourning we have seen before yet never get used to. Fans, strangers thousands of miles away, typed "Rest in peace," posting crying emojis, lighting virtual candles. But sorrow mixed with something darker, whispers of scandal, rumors of violence, accusations of mistakes, layers of speculation that almost drowned out the man's death itself. His family spoke out. His older sister wrote not once, but repeatedly, asking the public to stop spreading unverified stories. She asked that people delete malicious posts, that false assertions be retracted. Among the things she denied, says that Kim Jong-Seok broke into his girlfriend's house drunk, that he threw a soju bottle, that he fled or jumped from a roof when the police came. She said those claims are not true. She said that while he had been drinking that night, as had those close to him, the worst allegations being spread are distorted or invented. She promised to release recordings, of police audio, of a friend who was with him, and his last conversation with her. She wanted the dignity of truth. What is still unknown, the full cause of his death. The details of the final hours are not publicly confirmed beyond what his family and some police reports have already offered. The official statements mention emotional distress, financial hardship after being defrauded by someone he trusted. They mention that he lost property, faced debts, felt overwhelmed by despair. But whether he intended a way out that day, or whether accident or other circumstances intervened, those questions remain unanswered in public record. In life, Kim Jong-Seok was building. He started modeling in 2014, working in fashion, beauty, and steadily increasing visibility. He gained recognition through a men's grooming brand, Dashu, through digital content, through a reality/design show kind of TV presence, The Skip Dating, on TVN in 2022. He was not at the very top yet, but he was rising. He had fans, hopes, contracts, creative ideas. There were good moments, photo shoots, collaborations, shoots under city lights or studio lights, laughter during delays, the camaraderie with stylists, designers, hair makeup, lighting guys. All of that, now frozen in frames, now memories. Grief does not wait for truth. It floods in, messy, immediate. And when someone in public dies, everything else floods in too. Rumors, gossip, speculation. That night of June 4th, the story began to darken online, that he had stormed someone's home, that there was drunken fighting, police called, a soju bottle, a fall from a building. There were claims of escape, of panic, of shame. Some people reached for scandal because scandal clicks. Some people wanted a clear cause, because uncertainty is heavy, so they filled gaps with what they heard or feared. But his sister called these stories false. She said they are painful distortions, stories that wound even more than the death itself. Behind closed doors, in rooms lit more by heartache than light, people mourned. His parents, siblings, perhaps close friends, unsure, shocked, trying to understand. How did it spiral? Where did hope turn into desperation? When did he feel that help was too far or too heavy? There are hints: the fraud, the betrayal, the debt. He had been defrauded by a person he trusted, losing savings, losing stability. He had debts. He carried emotional pain. In public, we see polished pictures. But in private, the strain was real. The pressure of a rising career, social expectations, digital visibility, the need to be strong for others, these things weigh invisible stones. On June 4th, early in the morning, the authorities received a disturbance report at an office-tel in Hanam, in Gyeonggi Province. According to police documents, people had called in over a disturbance. The report says that Jong-Seok had visited his girlfriend's place because he was unable to reach her and was worried. There had been separate gatherings earlier that evening, he with his friend, she with hers. The police arrived, separated people, advised them to go home. Then Jong-Seok left the building. Sometime later, he jumped from a rooftop, as the police say. The timeline is not precise in publicly released documents, and some details remain contested. His family has confirmed some version of that series of events, but insists many rumors around motives and the behavior that night are false or exaggerated. To watch lives like his slip away is painful. And to see stories twist, grow, and sometimes become unfair, that is another kind of pain, for the living still here. The public, us, we hunger for closure. What happened, why, what should we feel? But closure is not always instantaneous or comfortable. It often means waiting, and respecting, and restraining the urge to assume. It means believing that grief is not entertainment. It means holding off on turning sudden death into a rumor-fueled spectacle. Kim's family has asked, pleaded, that people stop resharing hurtful posts, delete defaming claims, let his memory rest without layering more harm on raw wounds. They plan to share what they can, transcripts, recordings, audio, conversation, to correct the record. They want dignity for their son, their brother, their friend. Now there are ashes and echoes where dreams used to walk. I still can't believe it, one friend wrote. Fans left messages, may you rest in peace. Why did this happen? You were a gift to this world. The fashion houses, the studios, the gloss, the shine, all now shadowed with his absence. People remember not just the public figure but the small kindnesses. How he looked out for someone new, how he stayed late on set helping others, how he responded to a fan comment once with genuine warmth. These are the things people cling to when everything else feels too big. What we must avoid is letting the silence become hollow. Rumors fill holes truth hasn't yet sealed. But rumors spread pain. So in those days since his death, in those hours between confirmation and funeral, in the hours after mourners fell silent, great damage was done by what people assumed. Some headlines ran wild with stories about violence, some social media threads claimed criminal acts, etc. The family denied them one by one. What emerges is that many of those worst stories were false. Grouse over sensational headlines, over clicks over compassion. Journalism and social media both bear responsibility, of verifying, of respecting the living while reporting the deceased. Kim Jong-Seok's death speaks to something larger, something painful in our times. It speaks about mental health in the spotlight, about how young people who are partly famous live, partly on show, how personal financial betrayal and debt crush people whose image seems glossy on the surface. What remains now is waiting. Waiting for the full truth that his family promises to release. Waiting for the healing that words and memory might bring. Waiting for the public to remember compassion over curiosity, to choose kindness over sensationalism. Waiting for the world to allow him rest. May his memory be honored not with the loudest theory, not with the gnarled rumors, but with truth, with care, with justice for what he endured. And may we all, who still see the dawn, hold a little gentler, speak a little softer, remember that sometimes the brightest lights burn fastest, and that every person deserves more than just gossip when death touches them. Rest in peace, Kim Jong-Seok. The days after Kim Jong-Seok's funeral were strangely quiet. The loudest noise came not from the streets of Seoul but from phones, the sound of scrolling, of people looking for answers that no one truly had. Each reposted photo, each grainy clip, each new comment felt like another heartbeat of a story that refused to rest. But behind those digital echoes were real tears, not from strangers craving details, but from those who had once known his laughter. They were not mourning a celebrity. They were mourning a boy who used to laugh at his own mistakes, who once told friends he just wanted to make his parents proud. The memorials that sprouted online weren't just made of candles and flowers. They were filled with memories, people recalling the way he smiled at strangers, the way he gave small acts of kindness that cameras never caught. Someone shared how, during a shoot in Busan, Jong-Seok had given his jacket to a crew member shivering in the cold. Another shared a memory of him staying behind to help pack lights when everyone else had gone home. Those stories became little patches of light stitched against the darkness. But alongside the grief came guilt. So many fans and even friends said the same words, "I wish I'd reached out." That guilt, that feeling of maybe I could have done something, haunts the living more than the absence of answers. It reminds us of how fragile people are, how easily someone can hide their pain behind perfectly edited smiles. When the news broke, Midnight in Seoul became more than just a channel name whispered across the internet. It became a mood, a reflection of what everyone was feeling, that haunting stillness that only Seoul's night sky seems to hold. The city doesn't stop when someone dies. Lights keep flashing, cars keep humming, music keeps spilling from open bars. But in those moments, for those who loved Kim Jong-Seok, Seoul felt hollow. There's something almost cruel about how quickly the world moves on. News feeds refresh, algorithms bury old headlines, and grief fades into archives. But grief isn't content-friendly, it doesn't trend. It lingers, silent, stubborn, and personal. That's why so many have found themselves returning to old videos, scrolling through his old posts, looking at his handwriting on old fan notes. Each small trace feels like proof he existed, that he mattered. The truth is, the world rarely grants dignity to young deaths in the spotlight. It turns them into mysteries, into hashtags. And yet the people closest to him, his family, his sister, are still fighting not for fame, but for fairness. They want people to stop fabricating what they don't know, to let the investigation finish, to give his name back its peace. Kim Jong-Seok's passing has become more than a tragedy. It has become a mirror reflecting our society's obsession with stories over souls. It asks a painful question: how many times must someone die twice? Once in body, and again in rumor? There's a photo that fans keep reposting, him laughing under bright summer light, wind in his hair, no cameras visible, no stage makeup. Just him. It's a reminder that he was not just an actor, not just a model, but a human being, one who lived, loved, lost, and now is missed. And maybe that's what we need to hold on to. The small, human truth in a digital world that moves too fast for tenderness. Because beyond the headlines and hashtags, there are parents who wake up and still expect to hear his voice in the kitchen. There are friends who can't delete his number. There are stylists who still glance at the door, half expecting him to walk in late with his usual apology and grin. The grief is real. The silence is heavier than the noise. And maybe that's why people keep talking about him, because silence feels like losing him all over again. But somewhere beyond the chatter and the false stories, there is still love. Love that stays even when memory begins to fade. Love that fights through the rumors, that protects his name, that prays his soul rests somewhere peaceful, far from this world that wouldn't stop talking long enough to let him breathe. For the fans, his story is now part of Seoul's midnight, that strange glowing loneliness the city carries so well. Maybe you felt it too, walking past the Han River at night, watching lights flicker on the water, feeling both alive and empty at once. That's the soul that knows grief, the soul that never really sleeps, the soul that whispers his name when the traffic slows and the wind turns cold. And maybe that's why Midnight in Seoul was born, not just as a name, but as a space where stories like his are told with heart, not with hunger. Where we talk about the people behind the fame, the ones who smiled for us even when their own hearts were breaking. Where we remember that behind every trending tag is a human heartbeat that once wanted to be understood. So if you've read this far, pause. Take a breath. Think of Kim Jong-Seok not as a headline, but as a heartbeat that once lived in the rhythm of this city. Think of what his story means, not just the sadness, but the reminder that kindness matters, that gentleness matters, that listening before judging could save someone. At Midnight in Seoul, we tell these stories not to sensationalize, but to remember. To give voice to the silence that follows after the news fades. To hold space for the broken-hearted, for the forgotten, for the voices lost in the noise of fame. Because fame is fleeting, but memory, when it is cared for tenderly, can last forever. So tonight, when the city lights shimmer and the world feels a little too loud, remember Kim Jong-Seok. Remember the smile that made others smile. Remember the laughter, the kindness, the quiet strength he carried even when his own life was trembling. And let his memory remind you to check on someone, to reach out, to be the voice that says, "You're not alone." He may be gone, but his story isn't over. It lives every time someone chooses empathy over apathy, truth over rumor, and heart over haste. That's how he should be remembered, not as a tragedy, but as a reminder that life, however short, is meant to be felt deeply and shared gently. If this story touched you, if you felt something stir inside while reading about Kim Jong-Seok's light and loss, then join me. Come to Midnight in Seoul. Subscribe, stay, and feel. Because here, we don't chase stories, we honor them. We don't feed the noise, we listen to the silence. Kim Jong-Seok's name deserves to live where compassion lives. And that's exactly what we keep alive, every night, in Midnight in Seoul.